Hello, welcome to Cloud Native Live. I'm so glad you're here. Today we're going to dive into the code behind Cloud Native like we always do. I'm your host. My name is Whitney Lee and I'm a CNCF ambassador. So every week we bring a new set of presenters to showcase how to work with Cloud Native technologies. We'll build things, we'll break things, and we'll answer your questions. So this week we have Frank and Charles here with us from Nirmata, and they're going to talk about Kyverno Policy Reporter, unifying policy observability. So this is an official live stream of the CNCF, and as such, it's subject to the CNCF Code of Conduct, which basically means be nice to everyone. Be nice to your fellow folks in the chats, be nice to the presenters, and be nice to me too, please. So friends who are joining us live, please do say hello in the chat. I love that we're a part of a global event right now. And as always, if you have questions during the presentation, put those in the chat too, and we'll answer your questions as we go. And with that, I'll hand it over to Frank and Charles to introduce themselves. Charles, will you start, please?
Sure. So my name is Charles. I've been working for Nirmata for about 2 years now, and I'm a Kyverno maintainer for about 2 years too. So my daily job is mostly involved with open source like Kyverno, Kyverno JSON, Chainsaw, and of course the policy reporter we are going to present with Frank today.
Awesome. Frank, tell us about yourself, please.
Yeah, hello everyone. So I'm Frank. I'm from Germany. I'm at Nirmata for I think 1 month now, not that long. I come from a German dating app before, so the open source and the Kubernetes space was just my hobby. And I'm the creator and maintainer of Policy Reporter, which we want to present today.
Awesome. So which one of you will present first? Which screen should I share?
I'll be introducing the policy reporter tool first, but
Okay.
you don't need to share any screen at that point.
Okay, sounds good. Take it away.
So yeah, the first step is to just introduce the tool we are going to present today. This tool is called the policy reporter. It was originally created by Frank and donated to the Kyverno organization and is now part of the CNCF. So basically, the policy reporter is a non-opinionated tool to process different policy reports in Kubernetes clusters. So whatever policy reports are, let's imagine that you have some policies around your clusters to enforce or make sure that something is compliant with your policies. This will produce something called the policy report, and the policy reporter will make use of that. It will provide common observability features like metrics, notifications, user interface, and other things. But basically, by reading the reports, aggregating them, and transforming them into metrics, and those metrics will be made available and ingested in time series database like Prometheus. It can also analyze the reports and metrics and decide to generate notifications. Those notifications will be routed and delivered to registered receivers like Slack, Discord, or Grafana Loki. It also supports user interface where you can browse all the violations in your cluster, and the UI is a feature-rich application that lets you filter, sort, and group violations together. So it makes navigating through the policy reports that live in a cluster very easy and natural. And finally, there's a plugin system embedded with the policy reporter, because even if all tools and all policy report producers use the same format, which is a defined in a policy report. This policy report has to follow a known format. Some tools, some producers have unique features, and the policy reporter can leverage those unique features made available by the report producer by installing plugins, and the policy reporter will be able to ask the plugin the specific information for a given policy, because it knows that this policy report was generated by this specific tool, and we have a plugin that can enhance the report for this specific tool. So it's a solution to improve the quality and the content of the report based on the tool that generated it. So
That
yeah,
that all
that's
sounds
the introduction.
yeah, really cool. We're gonna see all of that in action, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm very excited.
Yeah, and to get a bit of background or one step back, why Policy Reporter was created or enhanced. So one issue we have as an administrator of a Kubernetes cluster is that we don't have one security tool. We have many different aspects in the cluster, like Kyverno as admission controller. We have Falco for runtime security, tools like Trivy for vulnerability scanning. And all these different tools have their own tooling, their own outputs. And yeah, we then have to find the informations we need. We have some informations in logs, others in CRDs, which are also tool specific. So Trivy comes with 4 to 5 different CRDs you have to serve. And yeah, this is very annoying when you want to have a real overview of your security in your cluster. And for this issue, Kubernetes working group was created, the Kubernetes policy working group, and Charles gives you some details about it.
Yeah, so this is part of a more global effort. Like, we are trying to standardize those policy reports. Right now, it started as an initiative by different companies and different tool creators, but it's going to become official at some point, but it takes time. You have to propose something, and you have to iterate to make sure that it will be usable and it will fit the needs for everyone. So maybe we can, if you can put my screen on the live stream, Whitney. Yeah. So sorry. So first, this is the GitHub repository for the working group about policy prototypes, and this one is about the community. So you can see on the GitHub repository for the working group policy community that the idea behind this working group is to provide an overall architecture that describes both the current policy-related implementations as well as future policy-related proposals in Kubernetes. This group is driven by 3 main maintainers. So there's Jim Bugwadia working at Nirmata, there's Poonam Lamba working at Google, and Andy Suderman working at Fairwind. So those are 3 people really deeply involved in the policy management field, and they are doing their best to make a common format for those policy reports. Of course, there's other contributors, but they are really the main maintainers behind this common effort. So you can join. We have bi-weekly meetings, so you can find all the information in this repo. And if we look at the different meetings, we have meeting notes, and the last one was only 1 week ago. And yeah, they keep addressing different questions, different concerns, and try to find solutions that will be sustainable in time. So yeah, if you are interested in policy reports and policy management and how to observe policies outcomes in a cluster, please join this group and contribute, because it's very important. And the other repository managed by those maintainers and contributors is the working group policy prototypes. So in this repository, we have all the work that was done by those contributors and maintainers. We can find, for example, the CRDs defined for the policy report. So here we will find the different CRDs that were created in the context of this working group. So you can find the policy report, the schema, and every field supported by the CRD. And we can give a look to policy report right after.
Will you zoom in on that, please?
Sorry?
Will you zoom in on it, please?
Oh, yes, sorry. So
Thank you.
let me do that. Oh.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it's just a custom resource definition, because right now this is completely work in progress, even if it's more and more mature every day, but it's not something you will find built in a Kubernetes cluster. The goal, the ultimate goal, is that this resource type is directly available in Kubernetes, is built into Kubernetes, and is part of every Kubernetes release and distribution. But we are not there yet. It will probably take a little bit of steps. So the first one would be to have this CRD in a SIG, and then after that, eventually integrate the resource directly in Kubernetes. And another, I don't have this one. Another interesting document is the CAP, because the maintainers keep it's not this one, it's in the README. Keep a Kubernetes enhancement proposal that they use to make this proposal evolve in the Kubernetes ecosystem. So this is the summary of the proposal: to add the policy report API directly in Kubernetes under a SIG first, and under a built-in resource once, maybe later. So this is basically all the work that the working group is doing. And if we look at a policy report for real, if I find my desktop here. So I created a Kubernetes cluster. For this quick demo, I will use a Kyverno policy. So I created a Kyverno policy to check a label. This label should be present on namespaces, and we expect the label to be named env and to have the value projection. So of course, most of the namespaces in my cluster don't follow this rule. And we can see that, oh, no.
Will you zoom in, please?
More?
It's just a different screen. Thank you.
Okay. So we can look at we can see that Kyverno created a bunch of cluster policy reports. So for example, for the namespace local path storage, we have a policy report, this one. And we can look at this policy report in more details. And we see that it's just a standard Kubernetes resource. The kind is cluster policy report. We have a name, namespace. We have different of labels and different informations. And there's a field containing the results. So this this particular namespace, we can see that the check label policy failed. The rule require env label was involved in the failure. We have a message like object metadata labels.env says that we require a field. And we have the source, we have the score, and so on. So this contains all the results behind the evaluation of the policy. And I created another namespace. This one is named OK, and it has the label. So this time, we can see that the same policy and same rule finally passed because the label, the expected label is present. So that's it. We have Kyverno, we have a policy defined that Kyverno manages, and depending on what resources and what policies are installed, it maintains reports for those policies and those resources in the cluster. And this is exactly what will be consumed by the policy reporter to do its job and create metrics, notifications, and so on from that.
That's awesome.
Thank you. So maybe Frank, if you want to continue.
Yes, when you could share my screen now, please. So at the beginning, so we already outlined the basic architecture of Policy Reporter. So it's a typically microservice-based solution. So you don't have one large application. It's split in different components. You can install, but you don't need to. The only required component is the core application, which does watch for the policy report CRD, converts it into an internal SQLite schema, and also provides the metrics and push notifications. We converting the CRD in a SQLite database for performance reason. You saw that Charles had for a single policy multiple resources with many or with more than one items. So this can really go to high numbers in large clusters with many workloads, and just fetching all CRDs and processing them each time is just to unperform it. Then we have the optional UI, which is the second component you can install. And as also mentioned, we have this plugin system, and each plugin is also a standalone service, which is optional, can be installed. And so we have the basic scope of Policy Reporter. I now will present my demo for anyone who's interested in trying it out themselves in the official Kyverno Policy Reporter repository in the 3.x branch, which I'm currently working on and will be the next major release. You have a demo.md file, which has step-by-step instructions to install the different components I'm using and how I'm setting up the policy reporter to get basically the same UI as I have. So let's get into the metrics maybe first. So Policy Reporter has a very customizable metric integration, which means that depending on setup and amount of workloads, you're free to add and remove labels as needed. So in the basic or in the default mode, you see that we have in this actual result table, so to say, for every information we get from the report. So as we saw in the demo of the resource, we have the source, which is Kyverno. We have a category, severity, the resource details, and the policy and rule, and the actual status. So as you can imagine, this is a very high cardinality, which can have impact on your Prometheus instance. And so if you want to reduce this, you will be able to customizing it, and you can check this out in the documentation to the labels you're really interested in. So you have different metric modes, and yeah, you can reduce this as you like. As you also see, Policy Reporter has an integration for the Prometheus operator within the official Helm chart. So when we check the demo parts, I basically I don't have it in this setup. Yeah, it's basically a flag you have to enable. You set monitoring to true, then you have to define some select labels, and then you get this ready to use dashboards where you can filter for any information and also for source if you have multiple ones like this setup. So we can reduce this to Kyverno results only. We can also switch to, for example, FICO results if we're interested in FICO details. So yeah, this is the metric integration. FICO might not be a good example. So maybe Trivi, where you see the different vulnerabilities you have in your resources. So as described, we have many different tools with different sorts of outputs. Some of them might provide their own metrics and dashboards, but you have to configure and install them yourself. And this way, you basically have one metric for all your different components, and you can build your own central dashboards, which using just this one metric. The second larger feature is the UI. So you also see in the UI, we have multiple dashboards for all the different tools we're running in our cluster. So we have a dedicated dashboard for FICO, which has no results yet. Also for Kyverno, where we see some fine-grained dashboards for different categories. So as you see, we have the pod security standards installed, the baseline and restricted set. And if you want your details just for this one category, you can go on the sub page and you get a really short overview about the overall state in your cluster, about the distribution across your namespaces. And then you have your list of namespaces, and you see for one app how many pass and fail results you have. And if you're really interested in which policy fails or passes, you have this resource-based details page, which gives you all details for this given resource. So you can see which policy and rule failed. You can open them and see, okay, when was this created and what does this fail really mean? So what I have to do to fix this. And yeah, so we can go through all our resources we want to fix and see what we can do to make them pass. And same goes for the Trivi integration. One different you might see is that in case of Trivi, We don't really have past results because you don't pass a vulnerability, of course. So it doesn't make sense to have just a red dashboard with all your failures. And in this case, you can configure a source as a vulnerability, as a severity source, which means that you see your different informations based on the severity of your failings. So instead of a just red dashboard with all the failures, you see how many medium or high vulnerabilities a resource has. And like in Kyverno, we can go inside a single resource and see what severity we have and what they mean, and if provided what we need to do to fix them for a given version.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So this is all based around the cluster policy report CRD, right? That
Yes.
hopefully will eventually be just an RD. And my question is, like, what is the scope of the CRD? Like, for every time a resource is evaluated, does that generate its own CRD, its own policy report, or is it grouped into a larger structure, or more of them put into a bucket somehow? Did I make sense with that question?
So how the vary depending on the actual producer.
Okay.
So in the spec itself, it's not defined if you have, for example, one policy for a policy report for a single policy or for a single resource. Producers like Kyverno produce one policy report per resource and has multiple results in it for the different policies which apply to this resource. Tools like Falco producing one policy report per namespace.
Okay.
So it's just one really large one. Yeah, there are different approaches, and
then it's time-based somehow, like every hour, all the policy passes and fails that happened in the past hour.
Yeah, that's also depending on the producer. Kyverno evaluates or recreates a policy report when the resource changed.
Okay.
It has also, I think, a time interval to recreate a policy report. And also when a resource is created over the admission review, a new policy report is created. In case of Falco, as soon as the Falco runtime detects misbehavior, it basically pushes this to a webhook to Falco Sidekick, and Falco Sidekick immediately updates the related policy report.
Okay.
But there's no refresh, so to say, because it's just when it happened, it's updated. So.
Excellent. It's okay. Interesting. So that's kind of interesting then to build a UI around that, which is, I mean, it's awesome actually. But understanding the parameters of what the time-based parameters or the namespace scope of it is an interesting problem to convey into the UI.
Yeah, there's also some discussions already in a future version of the policy report, because as mentioned, you have basically two use cases or two main use cases. Tools like Kyverno and tree vulnerability scanners, basically reflecting the current state of a cluster in the policy report. So when you have the complete Kyverno dashboard, you basically have the state of all your running workloads if they are not excluded somehow. And tools like Falco basically are a log of things that happened. But it's possible that, sorry?
Oh, based on how you described the way Falco updates the policy reports, it sounds like Falco's just telling you about all your errors. It's not telling you about passes.
Yeah, so to say. So when something happens, it updates or creates a policy report. It doesn't matter if the resource is already deleted, if the underlying policy or rule changed. It was just an event in the past and was persisted in the policy report. And it's basically working somehow. And this is in the current state not really reflected in the CRD. So it's just one schema for both cases. And there were discussions to add this this use case basically to the schema to make it easier for engines or users like Policy Reporter to make use of them and maybe change the processing or the UI based on the use case of the policy report. But that's not implemented yet.
So the hope is you can see something's failing, and then you can come over to your dashboard and you can figure out exactly where the failure is, like which cluster policy report is or one or many is reporting on it, and what exactly is happening in a much easier way than you were able to do before.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
Yes, and one additional feature you can use to accomplish this a bit easier are the notification features. So Policy Reporter works with a different set of integrations. So like Slack, Discord, Microsoft Teams. Also webhooks if you want to create your own tool to work with them. And what you basically can do is you can create Slack notifications and you get informed in your Slack channel that something happened. And then you can go to the dashboard and see the actual state of your resource that was failed somehow.
Cool.
So you get notified right away when something happened, and then you can go to the dashboard and see how is the state right now. Was it fixed? What is still failing? What we need to fix? Or what we need to do to achieve it, and so on. So this is a way you can combine this. I need to know that something happens, and I need to know how the current state is. Yes. And the other way around, what you also can do is, case for Kyverno, you want to know how a single policy performed. So you apply a new policy in Kyverno and you did it in audit mode, which means that you can still apply failing resources, but you get basically policy reports about them. And then you can check, okay, I have now this disallow capabilities policy. How does it perform? I see I have different failures in my cluster. And now I want to know which resources are actually failing. And I still have my my overview about which namespaces are affected and so on. And then I have my list, like in the resource dashboard, in another way that I now have a list of resources which fails and passes against this policy. And if you just want to fix this single policy, you can go through all your resources and basically drop the all capabilities. So yeah, this is, as mentioned, helpful when you want to check how a policy performs in general. Same goes for vulnerabilities. So like you have a new vulnerability, you run Trivy, a scanner in your cluster, and then you want to see, okay, I have this vulnerability, which resources have this and which services I run needs to be updated to fix this one. This is the second way you can use this dashboard, and yeah, you can filter them for different status. So if you really want to see only the failed ones, then you can just filter by the status. And yeah, same goes for other producers like config audit, where you basically see all results for a given policy. And this would be really hard to accomplish when you just have the CID, because in case of Kyverno, as mentioned, you create one policy report per resource, which means if you have one policy and a cluster with 10 namespaces and 100 resources, you need to grab 1000 policy reports for the single validation of a single policy to grab all this information together. And one new feature in the upcoming version of the UI, which I'm currently presenting, is the custom board. This tries to solve the issue when you have a multi-tenant setup or team-based permissions for namespaces. So we can basically set up additional dashboards which are based on a namespace selector or list of namespaces, and then we can give this dedicated dashboard, in our case for the infrastructure team, to give them a subset of our results only for the namespaces and tools they are interested in. So in this case, the infrastructure team, when I showcase the setup, this is, oh, did I not set it up correctly? Yeah, I can, let me quickly switch my sharing.
When you share, if you have more than one cluster, can one dashboard look at policy reports in more than one cluster at once?
Not directly. Policy Reporter has a multi-cluster functionality, which means that you can configure multiple clusters for a single UI. And then you have basically a switch to move between your clusters.
Nice.
So you don't have a single dashboard for all your clusters, but you can have a single dashboard and then move between the configured clusters to not have to serve different UIs.
Cool.
So I hope you see my
Will you zoom in,
code.
please?
Yeah, I'm on it. So now you should see the custom board configuration, where we have our name infrastructure and just select the namespace selector with team infra. And so we can define that this infrastructure dashboard only gives results for all namespaces which have this selector. And if we have some namespaces where a single team is responsible for, then we can also define team A custom dashboard with a team A label. We can also restrict the sources. So if they're not interested in results from Falco, for example, we can restrict this to Kyverno and the Trivi config audit reports. And we have a team B, which also restricted to Kyverno and config audit. And if we move back to the UI, then this is basically reflected. So we see only Kyverno and config audit. And we only see the user namespace, which has the team A label. And if we move to team B, same goes, but this time for the payment and for the subscription namespace. So this is a new easy way to reflect the requirement of having just a UI for the workloads you're really interested in and don't see the complete cluster with some system namespaces you never want to work on. So yeah, we also have some overview about the notification as mentioned. So as we saw, we have the Slack integration for Kyverno and Trivi. So when I switch to my Slack, you see that I have a bunch of notifications where I get the resource which was created and violates against some vulnerabilities, and I see the message and I can open the details and I see everything which I also would see in the UI, like affected version, fixed version, and so on.
And can you take actions on resource from the UI, or are you just meant to see where it is and then go find it in the cluster?
So right now it's only to see what happened. So there's no integration to fix something. What you can do in Kyverno, what is not enabled yet, you can create exceptions out of the UI. So Kyverno has a feature called policy exception, which means if you have a resource which violates a policy, but the resource is, for example, intended to violate this policy, or you are not able to fix it, you can create an additional policy exception resource to exclude this single resource for this single policy, and then it's no longer tagged as failed. This is something you can do for Kyverno, but for other integrations, there are no actions right now.
Is it declarative? Like, does it integrate with GitOps, say? What am I actually making a resource when I make a policy exception under the hood?
Yeah, the policy exception is another CRD in the Kyverno ecosystem. It basically gives you the YAML. You have to apply it yourself. So it does not apply something in your cluster. It just gives you the definition for it, and then you can download it or apply it, but it does not take any action directly.
Cool.
Yeah, you can push it in your GitOps repo and then merge the PR and it gets applied on the cluster.
Awesome.
Yeah, and out of this we might just check out the last part, the plugin system. So to give a short introduction to the plugin system. So it was completely reworked in the new UI I'm presenting, and it's basically defining a set of REST APIs your plugin needs to implement. So to be very generic and make it really flexible to provide your own plugins, it's just you need a service with a REST API, and this REST API need to implement the v1 policies API, which provides details for a given policy or for all available policies, and a details API for a given policy by name. And yeah, then you're ready to go. You can configure it in your, I have no direct setup.
This is a plugin into the UI to like
yes.
Okay, so the way is Trivia plugin, like the way you showed us Trivia and the way you showed us Falco?
Yes, there is
Okay,
currently two official plugins, the Trivia one and the Kyverno one. And yeah, you can both find in the Kyverno Policy Reporter plugins repository. there is basic or an overall description as mentioned, what APIs you need to define, how this affects the UI, and it also has an example implementation and kind of an API SDK for Golang, where you have these structs and clients. But as mentioned, because it's just in REST API, you can developing it in any language you like. You can have a node-based plugin, Rust, Go, whatever. As long as you implement the APIs, it's working.
Cool.
And it affects the API already in the list. So when we have maybe Falco, for example, oh no, we have no. So yeah, we have in case of Falco just syscall as name of our policy because this is the value in the policy report. In case of Kyverno, it also would be in normal cases some kind of CRD name, so this is a low minus capabilities. But because we're using the plugin, which provides a more user-friendly name, we basically see the disallow capability title and also a description of the policy, which is not part of the policy report. It's part of the policy CRD from Kyverno, and we got this information from the plugin. And if we go into a policy, we see this policy details, which would not be available when we don't have a plugin. So we see the producer, we see the min version of Kyverno we need, we see the subjects which apply to this policy, and some Kyverno specific information, like that for this policy, the background scan enabled, as well as the admission review, the failure policy and mode. And we can also check the complete definition of the policy, how it looks into or in our cluster. And also we can see that, for example, the title comes from this annotation, also the subject and so on. So the plugin fetches the CIDs from Kyverno, converts them into the REST API, and gets us the information as we see it.
Nice.
In case of Trivy, we also have a plugin which basically serves the vulnerability database. And in this case, we also see a very detailed description of our issue, when it was published, CVSS score, affected libraries, and the first fixed version, and so on. So many details we would not see in the policy report, and details which help to actual fixing the issues.
Yeah, it can help with the remediation, like how to fix this violation, why do I see a critical report for something. So it can add details on how to fix the issue you are facing.
I like that it can be kind of customized and shared across the org too.
Yeah. So that's the basic introduction. Maybe some side note. It has also different themes, especially for colorblind person, which is not always available for dashboards. So
that's awesome.
If you have issues with the default theme, you can pick up one of these. And at last but not least, if you want to try it out, as mentioned, there's this demo setup in the repository. I just released this new documentation for the version 3 with details about all the features I mentioned and showcased. What I did not show yet, the new API also supports authentication. So if you want to integrate it with your OpenID Connect tool, like Keycloak or something, you are able to do it. There's no authorization feature yet, but we're working on the first implementation right now. Yeah, you find the information about the multi-tenant I mentioned, where you can set up different clusters, in a single UI to switch between them from a single entry point. And yeah, also an upgrade guide if you're already using the old UI and want to move to this new one. There are detailed instructions what you need to update if you use the mentioned features.
Will you, Frank, in the private chat, will you give me a link to the demo and I'll put that demo link into the public chat?
Yep, sure.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, that's basically my demonstration for today.
Excellent. And Charles, did you have more to present or are we wrapping up?
Oh, no, I have nothing to present anymore. So great demo, Frank.
Yeah, great job.
I think you covered almost everything in Policy Reporter. So you did the whole job.
The word almost was intriguing, though. That was amazing. And I think that's really good work and really exciting frontier for security and really for making it easy to keep things secure. Like making security easy is so important to getting adoption. So thank you so much, both of you, for sharing your time and expertise. And thanks everyone in the chat for joining today's episode of Cloud Native Live. So Frank and Charles, you're the best. Thank you. And thanks for teaching us about Kyverno Policy Reporter. So we had a quiet chat today, but thanks for all the hellos. And here at Cloud Native Live, we bring you the latest in cloud native code on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and sometimes Thursdays at noon US Eastern. So thanks again, and thanks to everyone who watches the recording. Goodbye.